The stars looked different here. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the EU's Valiant, watching the alien space station grow larger on the main screen. After 6 months of travel through deep space, they had finally reached the Kepler 442 system. This was it, first contact with an alien race. Distance to the station? Morrison asked. 2,000 kilometers, and closing, sir, replied Lieutenant Amy Rogers from her position at the communications desk. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she monitored incoming signals. Morrison nodded. The Zalorian diplomatic station looked like a giant crystal floating in space. It was beautiful, with smooth curves and surfaces that caught the light from the nearby star. Nothing like the square metal ships that humans built. This was art as much as it was technology. Any response to our greeting? Morrison asked. Yes, sir. They're sending a welcome message now. Amy put her hand to her earpiece. They say they're honored to meet us and want to begin talks right away. Dr. Lisa Grant walked onto the bridge, carrying a data pad filled with notes. As the ship's chief scientist and diplomatic advisor, she had spent months preparing for this moment. She knew more about alien psychology than anyone else on the ship, even though all her knowledge came from theory and guesswork. How do they sound? She asked Amy. Polite. Very formal. They use big words and speak slowly, like they're being very careful about what they say. Morrison turned to his second in command. What's our tactical situation, Ben? Commander Ben. Tawhees checked his instruments. All quiet, sir. No other ships in the area. The station has some kind of energy field around it, but it doesn't look like weapons. Probably just shields. Good. Let's keep it peaceful. Morrison looked at Dr. Grant. You ready for this? Lisa took a deep breath, as ready as anyone can be for something that's never happened before. The communication system made a soft chime. Amy looked up from her controls. Captain, they're asking permission to come aboard our ship. They want to send a small group to meet with us. Morrison thought about this. Standard first contact rules said to meet on neutral ground, but the aliens were being polite about it. Tell them yes, but only 3 of them, and they come unarmed. Already done, sir. They agreed, right away. They're sending over what they call a harmony pod with 3 diplomats. On the main screen, a small craft separated from the crystal station. It moved smoothly through space without any visible engines. No fire, no exhaust, just silent movement. The ship itself looked like a smaller version of the station, all curves and bright surfaces. Impressive technology, muttered Chief Engineer Sam Parker as he watched from the back of the bridge. No obvious propulsion system. Could be some kind of gravity manipulation. The alien ship approached their docking bay. Morrison activated the ship-wide communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We are about to make first contact with an alien species. Everyone will treat our guests with respect and follow all protocols. This is a historic moment for humanity. 20 minutes later, Morrison and his team stood in the main docking bay. Dr. Grant checked her universal translator one more time. The device would try to turn alien speech into English, but she knew it would be far from perfect at first. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. The first alien to step through was tall and thin, almost twice the height of a human. Its body looked like it was made of living crystal, with blue and green colors that shifted and changed as it moved, where a human would have a face. This being had a smooth surface with patterns of light that pulsed gently. 2 more aliens followed. They were similar, but smaller, with different color patterns. All 3 moved with a grace that made them seem to float rather than walk. The tall alien stepped forward, and the patterns on its face grew brighter. When it spoke, the voice was like music mixed with the sound of wind chimes. Greetings, young star travelers. I am High Consul Vextera of the Zalorian Empire. We welcome you to our space with open hearts and peaceful intentions. The translator worked better than expected. Dr. Grant stepped forward and bowed slightly. Thank you, High Consul. I am Dr. Lisa Grant, representing the people of Earth. We come in peace, hoping to learn and share knowledge. Vexthera light. Patterns shifted to what might have been pleasure. How wonderful. We have watched your species for some time, waiting for you to develop the ability to travel between stars. You have done well to reach us. Morrison felt a small warning in the back of his mind. Watched them. For how long? But he kept his expression neutral. First contact was too important to mess up with suspicion. We are honored by your welcome, Dr. Grant continued. Would you like to see our ship? We have much to share about human culture and science. That would bring us great joy, Vexthara replied. But first, might we invite you to visit our station? We have prepared a place where we can speak more comfortably. The patterns on the other aliens' faces brightened, which seemed to be their way of showing agreement. Morrison noticed they hadn't introduced themselves yet. In human culture, that would be rude, but maybe aliens did things differently. We would be honored, Dr. Grant said before Morrison could object. As the diplomatic leader, it was her call to make. Commander Torres stepped forward. Captain Morrison and Dr. Grant will accompany you. I'll remain here with the ship. Vex turned toward Morrison. You are the military leader, yes. We sense great strength in you, but also wisdom. This is good. Many young species rely too heavily on force when patience would serve them better. Morrison wasn't sure how to respond to that. We believe in being prepared for anything, but we prefer peaceful solutions. Wise words. Come, let us show you the great work we do here. As they walked toward the alien ship, Morrison caught Torres's eye and gave him a small nod. It meant stay alert. Torres nodded back. He understood. The alien Harmony pod was even stranger inside than outside. There were no visible controls or screens, just smooth surfaces that glowed with soft light. Somehow, the ship knew where to go without anyone seeming to pilot it. Your technology is impressive, Dr. Grant said, as they traveled toward the station. We have had many years to perfect our methods, Vexthera replied. The Zolorian Empire has brought peace and order to 47 star systems. We learn from each species we meet, and they learn from us. Morrison felt that warning feeling again. 47 systems was a lot of territory. That suggested a very large and powerful civilization. That's quite an empire. How long did it take to build? Time moves differently for different species, Vexthera said, which wasn't really an answer. What matters is that we have created harmony, where once there was chaos. The Harmony pod slid smoothly into the docking area of the Crystal Station. As they stepped out, Morrison was amazed by what he saw. The inside of the station was like a vast cathedral made of living light. Walls curved up into impossible heights, and everywhere there were patterns of colored light that moved and danced. Welcome to Harmony Station, Vexthera said. Here, we help young species take their first steps toward a better future. Dr. Grant was clearly fascinated by everything she saw. Morrison was impressed too, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right. The word help bothered him. It suggested that humans needed help, and Morrison wasn't sure he agreed with that. But this was first contact. Whatever. Small concerns he had could wait. For now, humanity was taking its first steps into a larger universe, and Morrison was determined to make sure those steps led in the right direction. The next 3 days passed in a blur of meetings, tours, and cultural exchanges. Dr. Grant spent most of her time in deep conversations with scholar Nick Sandra, a Zolorian scientist who seemed fascinated by human biology and behavior. Your species is quite unusual, Nixandra said, as they sat in a room filled with floating lights that served as the station's library. Her light patterns shifted to colors that the translator said meant curiosity. Most creatures we meet follow predictable patterns, but humans... you are difficult to understand. Dr. Grant smiled. We get that a lot, even from other humans. What specifically puzzles you? Your emotional responses? When we showed you the destruction of the Kelvak homeworld, you showed distress. But the Kelvak were a violent species that refused to join our empire. Their removal brought peace to that entire region. Grant felt her stomach tighten. You destroyed their planet. Not destroyed, cleansed. We gave them many chances to accept our guidance. When they continued to resist, we had no choice but to remove the source of conflict. Nixandra's patterns shifted to what seemed like confusion. This is standard procedure. All species learn this eventually. Why does it trouble you? Grant tried to keep her voice calm. On Earth, we believe that differences can be solved without cleansing entire populations. But you have wars on your planet. We have studied your transmissions. Humans fight constantly. Yes, we fight. But we also try to find ways to stop fighting. We have laws, treaties, negotiations. We don't usually kill everyone who disagrees with us. Nixandra's light patterns grew brighter. How inefficient. Conflict that continues wastes resources and causes suffering. Quick resolution is more merciful. Grant excused herself and walked quickly to find Captain Morrison. She found him in another part of the station, with High Consul Vextera, looking at displays that showed the Zalorian Empire's territory. Quite impressive, isn't it? Vextera was saying. Each system represents another species that has found peace under our protection. No more wars, no more suffering. Just harmony and growth. Morrison nodded politely, but Grant could see the tension in his shoulders. How many species are we talking about? 47 distinct civilizations, each contributing their unique strengths to our collective growth. The Threks provide excellent engineering. The Malari are skilled farmers. The Zenthaxi excel at mathematics. Everyone has their place. And what about species that don't want to join? Morrison asked. Vextera's patterns dimmed slightly. That is, rare. Most species recognize the benefits of membership quickly. Those few who resist usually change their minds when they see how much better life can be under our guidance. Grant caught Morrison's eye and gave him a meaningful look. They needed to talk privately. Meanwhile, aboard the EU's Valiant, Commander Torres was having his own concerns. Lieutenant Amy Rogers had been monitoring Zalorian communications, and what she was finding didn't match the peaceful picture being painted at the diplomatic meetings. Sir, you need to hear this, Amy said, putting the translated conversation on the bridge speakers. A Zalorian voice filled the air. Fleet Master Zorthik to War Prime Kethmer. The humans show no obvious military escorts. Their single vessel appears to be lightly armed. Another voice responded, excellent. Maintain observation distance. If integration talks fail, we can proceed with standard pacification protocols. Torres felt ice in his veins. Amy, how many ships are they talking about? I'm reading at least 12 large vessels holding position, about 6 light hours out. They're using some kind of stealth technology, but our deep sensors can pick up their mass signatures. Pacification protocols, Torres muttered. That doesn't sound peaceful. Chief Engineer Sam Parker looked up from his instruments. Sir, I've been analyzing their technology. That crystal station isn't just pretty, it's a fortress. The energy readings suggest weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. Torres activated his private communication link to Morrison's portable unit. Captain, we need to talk. Priority Alpha. On the station, Morrison felt the vibration of his communicator against his wrist. Priority Alpha meant urgent military concerns. He smiled at Vexthera. Excuse me, High Consul. I need to check on my ship. Of course. We understand the needs of command. Perhaps Dr. Grant would like to continue our tours. Grant nodded, though she wanted to go with Morrison. They split up, Morrison heading to a private area where he could contact his ship, and Grant continuing with Vexthera. Your captain seems very cautious, Vexthera noted, as they walked through corridors filled with moving art. This is wise. Leadership requires careful thinking. He's a good man, Grant replied. He believes in protecting his people, as do we. Protection is the highest calling. That is why we offer guidance to younger species. The universe is dangerous. War, disease, environmental collapse. So many threats face developing civilizations. Under our protection, these dangers disappear. Grant watched the patterns on Vexthera's face. The aliens seemed genuinely sincere, but there was something wrong with the logic. What if a species wants to face those dangers on their own? Why? Would they choose suffering over peace? This makes no sense. Young species often think they want independence, but they lack the wisdom to see the bigger picture. It is our duty to help them understand. In a small room filled with communication equipment, Morrison spoke quietly with Torres. How many ships, Ben? At least 12? Probably more. They're staying hidden, but they're definitely there. And Jake, Amy intercepted some communications. They're talking about pacification protocols, if the talks don't go their way. Morrison closed his eyes. Any idea what that means? Based on what I'm seeing? Military conquest. This whole peaceful first contact thing might be a trap. Keep monitoring everything. If I give the code word Starlight, get us out of here immediately. Understood. Jake, ... Be careful. Morrison returned to find Grant and Vexthera looking at a display showing human cities from orbit. Your planet is beautiful, Vexthera was saying. So much diversity, so many different cultures. Under proper guidance, Earth could become a jewel of the Empire. We're pretty happy with how things are now, Morrison said carefully. Of course you are. All species feel attachment to their old ways. But imagine Earth without war, without poverty, without disease. Imagine your people working together with 47 other civilizations, sharing knowledge and resources. This is what we offer. Grant spoke up. That sounds wonderful. But what if we prefer to solve our own problems? Vexthera's patterns shifted to something that might have been confusion or disappointment. Dr. Grant, with respect, your species is very young. You have existed for mere thousands of years, while we have guided the galaxy for millions. You lack the experience to make such important decisions. Morrison felt anger rising in his chest, but kept his voice level. We appreciate your concern, but humans value their independence. Independence is an illusion young species often cling to. True freedom comes from accepting your place in the greater order. Vexthera's tone remained polite, but there was something final about it. Perhaps you need time to consider our offer properly. 2 more Zalorians appeared in the room. Morrison recognized War Prime Kethmer from their initial meeting, but the other was new. This one was larger and moved with clear military bearing. High Consul, Kethmer said, I believe it is time to explain the full situation to our guests. Vexthera's patterns dimmed. War Prime, we agreed to allow them time to consider. Time is a luxury, High Consul. Fleetmaster Zorthic reports unusual activity in nearby systems. If other species learn that humans have rejected our guidance, it could encourage dangerous ideas. Morrison and Grant exchanged glances. The word rejected suggested this wasn't really a choice. The large Zalorian stepped forward. I am Fleetmaster Zorthic, Captain Morrison, Dr. Grant. You should know that your species stands at a crossroads. You can choose to join our empire willingly, with all the benefits that brings, or you can choose to maintain your independence and face the consequences of that decision. What consequences? Morrison asked, though he was pretty sure he already knew. The universe is hostile to lone species. Pirates, raiders, hostile aliens, so many threats. Without our protection, Earth would be vulnerable to all of them. Grant's scientific training kicked in. Are you saying you would protect us from these threats? Or are you saying you would be one of those threats? The room fell silent. Vexthara's patterns flickered rapidly between different colors. Kethmer moved closer to the humans, and Morrison noticed that what he had thought was decorative crystal on the alien's body was actually some kind of weapon. Dr. Grant, Zorthik said slowly, young species often misunderstand the nature of protection. We offer security from all threats. Choosing to remain outside our protection means choosing to face those threats alone. Morrison's hand moved slowly toward his emergency communicator. If he pressed it, the signal would go straight to Torres with the code word, Starlight, but he wasn't quite ready to run yet. How long do we have to make this decision? He asked. The galaxy waits for no one, Captain. Perhaps 20 of your hours. That should be sufficient time to contact your leaders and help them understand the situation. 24 hours. Morrison looked at Grant and saw his own thoughts reflected in her eyes. This wasn't first contact anymore. This was an ultimatum. The next morning came too quickly. Morrison had barely slept, spending most of the night in secure communication with Earth and with Commander Torres. The news from home was not encouraging. Earth's military leaders were furious about the ultimatum, but they were also realistic. Humanity had one ship in alien space, facing an empire that controlled 47 star systems. Dr. Grant looked tired too as they walked to the main conference hall where the Zalorians had requested a final meeting. Any word from Earth Command? She asked quietly. They're mobilizing the fleet, but it would take months for them to get here. We're on our own. Morrison checked his communicator one more time. Torres was ready to extract them at a moment's notice, but Morrison wasn't sure they could outrun 12 alien warships. The conference hall was a massive crystal dome with walls that showed images of space. High Consul Vexthara was already there, along with War Prime Kethmer and Fleet Master Zorthik. But there were also 6 other Zalorians Morrison hadn't seen before, all of them large and clearly military. Captain Morrison, Dr. Grant, Vext said as they entered. Have you had time to consider our offer? Morrison took a deep breath. We have. Earth appreciates your invitation, but we must respectfully decline. Humanity prefers to remain independent. The light patterns on Vex's face dimmed considerably. This is disappointing. Are you certain? Joining our empire would bring your species great benefits. We're certain, Grant said firmly. We thank you for your offer, but we choose to make our own way. Kethmer stepped forward. This decision shows the foolishness of young species. You cannot comprehend the dangers you face alone. Zorthik activated some kind of device, and the walls of the dome began showing new images. Morrison saw space battles, planets burning, ships being destroyed. These are the Kelvak we spoke of earlier. They made the same choice you are making. Now, the images showed a planet under bombardment, cities burning, ships fleeing, and being hunted down by Zalorian vessels. Morrison felt sick watching it, but he forced himself to keep his expression neutral. The Kelvak were violent and refused all attempts at peaceful integration, Vexthara explained. Eventually, we had no choice but to protect the galaxy from their aggression. Grant watched the destruction with horror. They refused to surrender, so you killed them all. We removed a threat to galactic peace, Kethmer said coldly. This is what happens when species choose conflict over cooperation. Morrison's anger was building, but he kept his voice calm. And if we refuse your protection, the same threats that destroyed the Kelvak will eventually find Earth, Zorthik replied. Pirates, raiders, hostile empires. Without our guidance, your species will not survive. You mean you'll make sure we don't survive, Morrison said. The room went very quiet. Vexthara's patterns flickered rapidly. Captain Morrison, you misunderstand our intentions. Do I? You show up offering protection, but when we say no, you start talking about threats and showing us footage of genocide. It sounds like you're the threat. Kethmer's crystal body began to glow brighter. Your species lacks the wisdom to recognize salvation when it is offered. Morrison stood up. Our species recognizes a threat when we see one. And right now, you're it. The 6 military Zolorians moved closer. Morrison reached for his communicator, but Zorthik was faster. Some kind of energy beam shot from his hand and destroyed the device. I'm afraid we cannot allow you to contact your ship, Zorthik said. This conversation requires complete attention. Grant tried to activate her own communicator, but another Zolorian destroyed it as well. They were trapped. High Consul, Morrison said, looking directly at Vextera. Is this how your empire treats diplomatic guests? Vextera's patterns showed distress. This was not supposed to happen this way. Captain, please reconsider. Joining our empire truly is the best choice for your species. Under threat of extinction. That's not a choice. That's conquest. Cat moved even closer. Call it what you wish. The result is the same. Humanity will be part of our empire, willingly or otherwise. Morrison looked around the room. 8 armed aliens against 2 humans. No way to contact their ship. This was looking very bad. But he had one last card to play. Before you make any final decisions, Morrison said, I'd like to show you something. Zorthik laughed, a sound like breaking glass. What could your primitive species possibly show us that would matter? A little presentation about human history. You've shown us yours. It's only fair we show you ours. Vextera's patterns showed curiosity despite the tension. What kind of history? How we handle conflicts? Since you seem to think we're a peaceful species, I thought you might want to see how we actually deal with threats. The Zolorians looked at each other. Morrison could sense them communicating through their light patterns, though he couldn't understand what they were saying. Finally, Vexthera spoke. Very well. You may show us this history, but understand, it will not change the situation. Humanity will join our empire today, one way or another. Morrison smiled, but it wasn't a friendly expression. Oh, I think it might change things more than you expect. He pulled out a small data device from his pocket. This contains some footage I think you'll find educational. May I use your display system? Kethmer nodded to one of the military Zolorians, who took the device and connected it to the dome's projection system. Show us this human history, Captain. Let us see what your peaceful species considers worthy of our attention. The walls of the dome went dark for a moment, then images began to appear. The first scene showed ancient human warriors on horseback, charging across a battlefield with swords and spears. The Zolorians watched with what appeared to be amusement. Primitive combat, Zorthik commented, as expected from a young species. The images shifted forward in time. Roman legions marching, medieval knights in armor, cannons firing during the Age of Sail. The Zolorians remained unimpressed. Your species has always been violent, Nixandra said. This confirms our assessment that you need guidance. But Morrison was just getting started. The footage moved into more recent history. World War I, with its trenches and gas attacks, and millions of dead. World War II, with its massive tank battles and aerial bombardments and nuclear weapons. Some of the Zolorians began to pay closer attention. The scale of destruction was impressive, even to an empire that had conquered 47 star systems. Interesting, Vexthera said. Your species can organize large conflicts, but these are still planetary disputes. Nothing that would concern a galactic empire. Morrison's smile got wider. Oh, we're just getting to the good part. The footage shifted again. Now it showed space-based combat. Human ships fighting in the asteroid belt. Orbital bombardments. The siege of Mars during the Colonial Rebellion. The destruction of Europa Base. The Zolorians were no longer amused. These weren't primitive land battles or even planetary wars. This was serious military technology in action. When did this occur? Kethmer demanded. About 50 years ago, Morrison replied calmly. Just a little disagreement about colonial independence. Nothing major. The images kept coming. Fleet actions, involving hundreds of ships, weapons that could crack planets, space stations being destroyed by beams of pure energy. The Zilorians watched in growing silence. "This is fiction," Zorthik said, but his voice was uncertain. "No species develops such weapons so quickly." "You're right," Morrison agreed. "It usually takes much longer, but humans are good at learning from their mistakes. And we make a lot of mistakes." The final sequence began. This showed the most recent conflict. Morrison had access to the border. Wars with the Centauri pirates. Human warships moving through space like deadly dancers. Weapons that could destroy entire fleets in seconds. Tactics that turned space itself into a weapon. The dome went dark. The Zilorians sat in complete silence. Finally, Vexthera spoke. These are not the transmissions we intercepted from your planet. We saw no evidence of such military capability." Morrison stood up slowly. "That's because we don't advertise it. Funny thing about humans, we only fight when we have to, but when we do fight, we fight to win." Grant added quietly, "The transmissions you intercepted were from our entertainment and news broadcasts. You saw what we wanted the galaxy to see." Kethmer's light patterns were flashing rapidly. "You are attempting to deceive us." "No single ship could let me stop you right there," Morrison interrupted. "Zorthik, your fleet of 12 ships. We've been tracking them since we arrived. And Warprime Kethmer, that crystal station you're so proud of. Our engineers have already identified 17 different ways to destroy it." The room erupted in angry light patterns from the Zilorians, but Morrison wasn't finished. "Remember how you said the universe was hostile to lone species? You were right. That's why we learned to be more hostile than anything else out here." He looked directly at Vexthera. "High Consul, you made one crucial mistake. You assumed that because we came here peacefully, we were a peaceful species. We're not. We're a species that chooses when to be peaceful and when to be something else entirely." Morrison activated a hidden switch on his uniform. Suddenly, the dome filled with new images, real-time feeds from the EOS Valiant. But this wasn't the exploration vessel the Zilorians thought they knew. The ship's hull was opening, revealing weapon systems that had been hidden behind false panels. Missile batteries that could level continents. Energy cannons that could punch through a moon. And in the cargo bay, something that made even Morrison nervous. A planet killer torpedo. "Now then," Morrison said calmly, "shall we discuss the terms of Earth's independence?" The silence in the crystal dome was complete. 8 Zilorian leaders stared at the images of the UES Valiant's true form, their light patterns dim with shock. What they had thought was a simple exploration vessel had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. Warprime Kethmer was the first to find his voice. "This is impossible. Our scans showed minimal armament." Morrison smiled coldly. "Your scans showed exactly what we wanted them to show. Humans are very good at hiding things when we need to." Chief Engineer Sam Parker's voice came through the ship's communication system, speaking directly into the dome. "Fleetmaster Zorthik, this is Chief Parker aboard the Valiant. I've been monitoring your ships for the past 4 days. Would you like to know their exact positions?" Before Zorthik could answer, Parker continued, "Your flagship is at coordinates 47 Mark 12, approximately 6 light hours from here. The Harmony's Edge is holding position at 23 Mark, -89. Your stealth cruiser, Silent Dawn, which isn't as stealthy as you think, is trying to flank us from the asteroid field." Zorthik's crystal body began to glow with what looked like anger or fear. "How do you know our ship names?" "We've been listening to your communications since day 1, Parker replied cheerfully. "Nice encryption, by the way. Took us almost 6 hours to crack it." High Consul Vexthera's patterns were flashing rapidly between different colors. "This cannot be correct. We are the most advanced civilization in this galaxy. Our technology has been developed over millions of years. Dr. Grant spoke up quietly. Hi, Consul. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've gotten very good at it. When we finally reached space, we brought all that experience with us. Morrison activated another control, and the dome's display changed to show detailed schematics of Zalorian ships. Your vessels are impressive, Fleetmaster. Beautiful design, advanced materials, excellent energy efficiency. But they have one major weakness. What weakness? Zorthik demanded. They're designed to fight species that can't fight back. Your whole empire's built on overwhelming primitive civilizations. You've never faced an enemy that could actually hurt you. The display zoomed in on critical sections of the Zalorian ship designs. Your power cores are unshielded because you've never fought anyone who could target them accurately. Your bridge sections are exposed because you've never faced weapons that could reach them. Your fleet formations are perfect for intimidation, but terrible for actual combat. Commander Torres's voice joined the conversation from the Valiant. Captain, we're receiving movement from their hidden fleet. Looks like they're trying to get into attack position. Morrison nodded. Ben, show them what happens when they do that. The dome's display switched to show space around the station. 12 Zalorian ships were indeed moving, trying to surround the human vessel. But as they moved, the space around them began to fill with small objects. Those are mine satellites, Morrison explained calmly. We deployed them the moment we arrived. Each one contains enough explosive power to crack a small moon. They're currently attached to your ship's hulls. Zorthik stood up abruptly. You have violated our sovereign space with weapons. You surrounded us with warships and threatened to destroy our planet, Morrison replied. I'd say we're even. But Morrison wasn't done with his presentation. He activated another sequence, and the dome filled with images that made the previous footage look tame. This is the Titan defense grid around Earth, he said as massive space stations appeared on screen. Each platform carries enough firepower to sterilize a continent. There are 300 of them. The images shifted to show the human fleet. Not just a few ships, but thousands of them. Carriers that could launch fighter swarms capable of blotting out stars. Battleships that could punch holes through planets. Cruisers designed specifically for hunting and killing other warships. This is our home defense fleet, Morrison continued. It's the smallest of our 3 fleets. The other 2 are currently exploring different parts of the galaxy, looking for suitable planets to colonize. Nixandra's patterns were now pulsing rapidly with what looked like panic. How many worlds do you control? Currently, just Earth. But we have colonies on Mars, Europa, Titan, and about 40 asteroid mining stations. Oh, and we've recently established outposts in 12 other star systems. Grant added, we don't conquer other species. We find empty worlds and make them livable. It's more work, but we prefer it that way. The display changed again, showing human terraforming technology, machines that could reshape entire planets, atmospheric processors that could make hostile worlds breathable, weather control systems that could redirect hurricanes or create rain in deserts. Impressive, Vextara said quietly, but surely you see the benefit of cooperation. Together, our species could what? Morrison interrupted. Help you. Conquer more species. Make your empire even larger. No thank you. Kethmer stepped forward aggressively. You speak as if you have a choice in this matter. Even with your hidden weapons, you are still only one ship against our entire fleet. Morrison's smile became genuinely frightening. Warprime, let me explain something about human military doctrine. We don't build ships to fight fair. We build them to end conflicts as quickly as possible. The display now showed technical specifications for the UES Valiant itself. The numbers were staggering. Weapon yields measured in planetary destruction units. Shield generators that could deflect the energy output of a star. engines capable of moving faster than anything the Zalorians had ever seen. The Valiant is what we call a deep space exploration vessel, Morrison said casually. It's designed to operate alone in hostile territory for extended periods. That means it needs to be able to handle any threat it might encounter. Sam Parker's voice came through again. Fleetmaster, I'm reading energy buildup in your ship's weapon systems. I should mention that any hostile action will trigger our automated response systems. What response systems? Zorthik asked. Well, first, those mine satellites I mentioned will detonate simultaneously. That should disable your fleet. Then our main guns will target your power cores with pinpoint accuracy. Finally, if any of your ships survive that, our planet killer torpedo will eliminate this entire star system. The dome fell silent again. The Zalorians were communicating through rapid light patterns, but their body language suggested panic. Morrison let them talk for a moment, then continued his presentation. Of course, we'd prefer not to do any of that. Humans actually do prefer peaceful solutions. But we learned a long time ago that peace only works when both sides want it. The display showed historical footage of human diplomacy. Treaties being signed, trade agreements being negotiated, former enemies working together. But it also showed what happened to civilizations that chose conquest over cooperation. The thing about humans, Dr. Grant said quietly, is that we remember everything. Every betrayal, every broken treaty, every act of aggression, and we learn from all of it. Morrison nodded, which brings us to the current situation. High Consul, you offered to protect humanity from galactic threats. The problem is, after spending 4 days with you, we've concluded that you are the galactic threat. Vexthera's patterns dimmed considerably. Captain Morrison, surely we can find a way to coexist peacefully. Absolutely, Morrison agreed. It's very simple. Your empire stops expanding. You release any species that wants independence. You dismantle your invasion fleets. And you never, ever threaten Earth or any human colony again. Kethmer, S. Crystal, body flared with anger. Impossible. We cannot simply abandon our divine mission to bring order to the galaxy. Morrison looked at him with cold eyes. Warprime, let me be very clear about something. Your empire exists because no one has been strong enough to stop you. That just changed. He activated the final sequence of his presentation. The dome filled with images of human military exercises, fleets conducting training maneuvers, weapons being tested on empty planets, combat simulations involving millions of virtual ships. This is how humans prepare for war, Morrison said. We train constantly. We plan for every possible scenario. We build weapons we hope we'll never need to use. And most importantly, we share everything we learn with every other human in the galaxy. The images showed the scope of human military preparation. Training academies on dozens of worlds. Research facilities developing new weapons. Communication networks that could coordinate fleets across the entire galaxy in real time. Right now, Morrison continued, every human ship, station, and colony in known space is receiving a complete briefing on Zalorian technology, tactics, and weaknesses. If anything happens to Earth, or to this ship, or to any human anywhere, the response will be immediate and total. Commander Torres's voice came through one final time. Captain, we're receiving new signals from the Zalorian fleet. It looks like they're powering down their weapons and backing off. Morrison looked directly at High Consul Vexthera, a wise decision. Now, shall we discuss the new terms of our relationship? For the first time since the presentation began, Vexthera's light patterns showed something that might have been respect. Captain Morrison, it seems we have greatly underestimated your species. Yes, Morrison replied simply. You have. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? 6 hours later, the Crystal Dome had become a very different place. The threatening displays of Zalorian military might had been replaced by star charts, showing trade routes and communication networks. The 8 Silurian leaders sat across from Morrison and Grant, but now they were negotiating as equals, rather than conquerors and victims. High Consul. Vexthera's light patterns had stabilized into colors that the translator identified as thoughtful and cautious. Captain Morrison, I must admit that our first assessment of humanity was ... incomplete. Morrison nodded. That's understandable. We work hard to make sure it is. War Prime Kethmer, who had been silent for most of the past hour, finally spoke. Your species fights in ways we have never encountered. Our military doctrine assumes that advanced civilizations fight with honor, following established rules of engagement. Humans fight to win, Morrison replied simply. Honor is great, but survival is better. Dr. Grant leaned forward. Hi, Consul. I'm curious about something. You mentioned that your empire has existed for millions of years. In all that time, have you never encountered a species that could resist your expansion? Vexthera's patterns shifted to what might have been sadness. We have met species with advanced technology, yes, but they were always peaceful, focused on science and art rather than warfare. When faced with our military might, they chose to join us rather than fight, because they were smart enough to recognize a superior force, Kethmer added. Or because they were decent people who couldn't imagine the level of violence necessary to resist you, Grant suggested. Not everyone thinks the way humans do. Scholar Nixandra, who had been quietly observing the entire exchange, spoke up. Dr. Grant, may I ask you a question about human psychology? Of course. How is it possible for your species to be both peaceful and so ... effective at warfare? These seem contradictory. Grant thought about that for a moment. They're not contradictory at all. We're peaceful because we know what war really costs. Every human learns about our history, the millions who died in our wars, the cities destroyed, the families torn apart. We choose peace because we've experienced the alternative, Morrison added, but we also learned that sometimes peace isn't possible. Sometimes you face an enemy that only understands force. When that happens, you'd better be ready to speak their language. Fleet Master Zorthik, who had been monitoring his fleet's retreat, looked up from his instruments. Captain, your tactical analysis of our ships was uncomfortably accurate. How long have you been studying our technology? Since the moment we met you, Morrison replied. Humans are naturally curious, and we have a saying, know your friends, but know your enemies better. Are we enemies? Vexthera asked quietly. Morrison considered that question carefully. That depends entirely on what you do next. If you continue trying to conquer and integrate other species, then yes, we're enemies. If you're willing to change your approach, we might become something else. What would you suggest? Vexthera asked. Grant pulled out a datapad and activated a holographic display. We've prepared a proposal. Instead of an empire based on conquest, what if you created a genuine alliance based on mutual benefit? The display showed a network of star systems connected by trade routes and communication lines. Each species maintains its independence and sovereignty. You work together on common problems, exploration, scientific research, defense against actual threats. Everyone contributes what they can, and everyone benefits. Kethmer studied the display, and if some species refuse to participate, then they don't participate, Morrison said. You leave them alone. It's called respecting other people's choices. But what if they become a threat to galactic peace? Then you deal with actual threats when they actually become threats. Grant replied. You don't destroy entire civilizations because they might cause problems someday. Nixandra's patterns brightened with what seemed like excitement. This would allow for much greater diversity of thought and culture. Our empire has become ... uniform. Every world follows the same patterns. Diversity makes everyone stronger, Grant agreed. Humans learned that the hard way. Our greatest advances came when different cultures shared their knowledge. Vexthora was quiet for a long moment, her patterns cycling through different colors. Finally, she spoke. What you propose would require fundamental changes to our entire civilization. Millions of years of tradition, Why? Sometimes traditions need to change, Morrison said. The question is whether you're strong enough to change them. And what would humanity's role be in this new alliance? Morrison and Grant exchanged glances. They had discussed this during their preparation time. We'd be partners, Grant said. We'd share our technology, our knowledge, our resources. But we'd also be the ones watching to make sure everyone plays by the rules. Watching, Zor asked suspiciously. Someone needs to make sure that the strong don't prey on the weak, Morrison explained. Humans are good at that job, because we've been both strong and weak at different points in our history. Kethmer's patterns flashed with something that might have been amusement. You would appoint yourselves as galactic peacekeepers. Someone has to do it, Morrison replied. And honestly, most species are too peaceful to handle the job. They try to negotiate with aggressors instead of stopping them. And if we refuse this proposal, Vexthera asked. Morrison's expression became serious. Then we go back to Earth, report on our first contact experience, and prepare for war. Because High Consul, after what we've learned about your empire, we can't let you continue operating the way you have been. The dome fell silent again. The Zalorians communicated through their light patterns for several minutes. Finally, Vexthora spoke. Captain Morrison, Dr. Grant, we will need time to consider your proposal. Changing an empire that has existed for millions of years cannot be done quickly. We understand, Grant said. But understand this, change is coming, whether you choose it or not. The galaxy is about to become a much more dangerous place for empires that prey on weaker species. Morrison stood up. How much time do you need? Perhaps one of your standard years. Morrison shook his head. Too long. Every day you delay, more species suffer under your expansion. You have 30 days to begin implementing changes, and 6 months to complete the transition. Kethmer bristled. You cannot dictate terms to the Zalorian Empire. War Prime, Morrison said quietly. I just did. The question is whether you're going to accept those terms, or find out what happens when you don't. Vexthera raised a hand to stop Kethmer from responding. 30 days to begin, 6 months to complete, and if we agree, humanity will help us make this transition. We'll provide technical assistance, mediation services, and protection during the transition period, Grant confirmed. We want this to work, High Consul. A galaxy full of free, independent species working together is better for everyone, including humanity. Morrison smiled, and for the first time, it was genuinely warm, especially humanity. We get bored when there's no one interesting to talk to. 3 hours later, Morrison and Grant were back aboard the EU's Valiant, watching the Zalorian station shrink in the distance. Commander Torres joined them on the bridge. Think they'll actually do it? Torres asked. Grant looked at the data they had collected. Vexthera wants to. She genuinely believes in the benefits of peaceful cooperation. The question is whether she can convince the military leadership. Morrison nodded. Kethmer and Zorthik are going to be problems. They've built their entire careers on conquest. Changing to peaceful cooperation means admitting they were wrong all along. What if they try to remove Vexthera from power? Torres asked. Then we'll have to deal with a military coup, Morrison replied. But I don't think it will come to that. Did you see how quickly their fleet backed down when we showed them what we could do? They're not stupid. Lieutenant Amy Rogers looked up from her communication station. Captain, we're receiving a message from Earth Command. They want a full report on first contact procedures. Morrison laughed. Tell them first contact went exactly according to plan. We met a new species, established diplomatic relations, and negotiated a peaceful resolution to potential conflicts. Should I mention the part where we threatened to destroy their entire empire? Rogers asked. That's what negotiated a peaceful resolution means, Morrison replied with a grin. Grant was still studying the Zalorian data. You know, if this works, if they actually transform their empire into a genuine alliance, it could change the entire galaxy. Big if, Torres said. Maybe, Grant agreed. But for the first time in millions of years, the Zalorians have encountered something that made them question their assumptions. That's a start. Morrison looked out at the stars ahead. Either way, the galaxy just became a very different place. Every species out there is going to hear about what happened here. Some of them will be inspired to resist empires like the Others will decide they need to be stronger to survive. Arms race, Torres asked. Maybe. Or maybe everyone will realize that cooperation works better than conquest. Morrison activated the ship's intercom. All hands. This is the captain. Course laid in for Earth. We're going home. As the EU's Valiant jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving the Kepler 442 system behind, Morrison reflected on the past week. Humanity had made first contact with an alien civilization, discovered that they were part of a galaxy-spanning empire, been threatened with conquest, and turned the tables completely. Not bad for a peaceful diplomatic mission. 6 months later, reports would reach Earth of the first Zalorian-controlled system to declare independence without being destroyed in response. Then another, then a dozen more. The Zalorian Empire was transforming itself into the Zalorian Alliance, and other empires across the galaxy were taking notice. Some would follow the Zalorian example, others would decide that humanity represented a threat that needed to be eliminated, before it could spread its dangerous ideas about freedom and independence. But that was a problem for another day. For now, Captain Jake Morrison and the crew of the U's Valiant had successfully completed humanity's first contact with an alien species, and they had done it exactly the way humans always did things, by being peaceful until peace was no longer possible, and then being very, very good at the alternative.